9:23 hours, South China Sea. The USS Princeton, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, was conducting a routine freedom of navigation patrol when her SPY-1 radar detected something unusual, a Chinese Type 052D destroyer, accelerating from 18 to 30 knots in less than 90 seconds. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors exchanged sharp glances. This wasn't random movement. "Contact accelerating fast," reported the radar operator. "Range, 200 kilometers." Bearing steady unknown to the Americans, the Chinese destroyer Zhang had just received new orders from Beijing. Intercept the Americans, force them to alter course, make them blink first. But Beijing was about to learn a familiar lesson. Challenging the US Navy in open water remains a spectacularly bad idea. 9:26 hours. The Princeton's radar locked onto the approaching destroyer. The ship's computers identified the target, a Type 052D Luoyang 3, the pride of the Chinese Navy. Threat level, moderate to high. Her captain stood silent on the bridge. "Intent?" asked the tactical action officer. "Likely intimidation," replied the intelligence officer. "Pattern matches previous harassment operations." The captain didn't respond immediately. His eyes were fixed on the radar scope, on the bright dot racing toward his formation. "Let's see how far they're willing to go," he finally said. Outside, the vast expanse of the South China Sea shimmered in the morning haze. Over 40 commercial vessels navigated nearby, tankers, container ships, freighters, all depending on the US Navy's presence to keep the sea lanes open. If the Chinese wanted to flex power here, they'd have to do it in front of the entire world. 9:30 hours. The Princeton's cooperative engagement capability linked with every ship in the carrier strike group. Within seconds, the USS Nimitz, USS Chang'un, and USS Kidd received identical threat data. The Nimitz, 104,000 tons of floating diplomacy, adjusted her air operations. Catapult officers prepped the next launch cycle. Below deck, ordnance crews armed FA-18E Super Hornets with live missiles. The air defense network tightened, a defensive sphere stretching 200 nautical miles across. 9:35 hours, 25,000 feet above, an E-2D Hawkeye orbiting at altitude picked up something alarming. Multiple radar returns, fast, climbing, closing from the north. The system confirmed J-15 fighters launched from the Chinese carrier Shandong. "Bogies inbound, heading south," came the airborne controller's calm report. The pilots weren't just training, they were vectoring directly toward the American formation. Meanwhile, below the waves, the Princeton sonar operators reported a submerged contact, 80 nautical miles west, an acoustic signature consistent with a Type 039 diesel-electric submarine, a three-pronged move, destroyer, fighters, submarine, a deliberate show of force. But for the US Navy, it was just another day at sea. 9:37 hours, flight deck, USS Nimitz. Steam hissed across the carrier's deck as the first Super Hornet shot off the catapult, then another and another. Every 45 seconds, a jet roared into the humid air. Within minutes, an entire squadron climbed skyward. BFA-14 top hatters, fully armed and combat ready. Each aircraft's APG-79 AESA radar could track and engage multiple targets simultaneously. The Chinese J-15S, meanwhile, struggled to gain altitude, limited by their ski jump launch system, which forced them to take off light on fuel and weapons. 9:41 hours, 18,000 feet. The first American pilots locked onto Chinese fighters at maximum range. Target groups confirmed Angels 20. The flight lead called. On their radar screens, the Chinese formation appeared scattered and disorganized. The Americans flew in a wall formation, a three-tiered spread perfected through decades of combat training. High cover, mid cover, low interceptors, each protecting the other, each ready to engage. 9:43 hours, over the open sea. Aboard a USR C-135 rivet joint aircraft orbiting 200 miles east, Mandarin linguists intercepted Chinese radio traffic. According to signals obtained by global warfare report sources, the pilots were requesting permission from Beijing for aggressive maneuver clearance. They weren't authorized to act yet. The Americans, on the other hand, didn't need permission. They were trained to decide within seconds. The gap wasn't just in technology, it was in doctrine, discipline, and experience. 9:47 hours on board the Princeton, the radar alarm pinged again. The Chinese destroyer's Type 346 Tiwei phased array radar had stopped scanning and switched to fire control mode. It was now locked onto the USS Nimitz. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tension was quiet but sharp. Every sailor knew what that meant. This was the electronic equivalent of pointing a loaded gun at someone's head. The captain stood motionless. "Maintain course," he ordered. "Log every emission. Document the lock." The Americans didn't react with panic. They responded with precision. Every radar pulse, every bearing, every frequency was captured. If this went kinetic, the Chinese destroyer wouldn't last 30 seconds. 9:49 hours, Combat Information Center, USS Princeton. The Chinese destroyer's radar lock continued for 30 seconds, then abruptly dropped. The signal operator confirmed, "Lock broken." They're backing off, but the damage was already done. Every frequency, pulse pattern, and tracking signature had been recorded. According to data later obtained by Global Warfare Report, this encounter provided the U.S. Navy with valuable insights into China's latest radar behavior, information that could determine the outcome of a future war. The captain crossed his arms. "They wanted a reaction," he said quietly. "Well, they just gave us their playbook." 9:52 hours, airspace. South of Hainan, 2. J-15ES broke formation. One pilot, identified by Western defense sources only as Blue 32, dived toward an American Super Hornet. He came in fast, rolling inverted just 200 feet above the sea, closing the distance to within 300 meters. Inside the FA-18 cockpit, the American pilot didn't flinch. He rolled inverted too, sliding effortlessly into the Chinese fighter's 6 o'clock position. For 3 long seconds, his helmet-mounted display locked a perfect infrared tone on the J-15's tail. One squeeze of the trigger, and the AIM-9X Sidewinder would have ended the fight instantly. He didn't squeeze. He didn't need to. Discipline held. Professional restraint, something the U.S. Navy had mastered over a century at sea. 9:56 hours below the surface. The sonar operator on the Princeton suddenly called out, "Subsurface contact." Bearing 159, range 1 to 5,000 yards. Contact is snorkeling. The acoustic data matched a Type 039 A1 class submarine, and it was making enough noise to embarrass an engineer. Every propeller blade rotation echoed through the ocean like a freight train. The captain nodded grimly. "Track him. No active pinging. Let's keep him guessing." Unverified intelligence later claimed that this same submarine had been shadowing the Nimitz strike group for 2 days. If true, it was about to regret surfacing anywhere near American sonar. The Princeton's fire control system silently built multiple engagement solutions, ASROC, Mark 54 torpedo, or even airstrike vectoring if required. If this went hot, the submarine had 12 seconds to exist. 10:02 hours, combat, air patrol zone. The Chinese formation was losing coherence. J-15 pilots were struggling with limited fuel and poor coordination. In contrast, the American fighters operated as a single data-linked organism. Dark Star copies all contacts, came a voice from the E-2D Hawkeye controller. Link 16 feed stable. Targets verified and tracked. Continue wall formation. Every American aircraft saw the same picture. Every target was triangulated. Every weapon was within reach. Chinese pilots, cut off by jamming, were now relying on radio calls. Static filled their channels. Electronic interference generated by EA-18G Growlers, now orbiting 100 miles north. 10:09 hours. Electronic warfare zone. The Growlers switched to full-power jamming mode. Their ALQ-99 pods screamed across the spectrum, flooding Chinese radar frequencies with false returns. On board the Chinese carrier Shandong, radar screens dissolved into chaos. Thousands of ghost contacts, false pings, and disappearing echoes. One Chinese operator muttered something later, translated by analysts as, "We can't see them. They're everywhere." This, according to Global Warfare Report's defense sources, was the exact point of the American response, not a missile, signal, not a warning shot, just complete, humiliating technological dominance. 10-14 hours. Subsurface encounter. Meanwhile, the unseen force beneath the waves made its move. A Virginia-class attack submarine, operating undetected for over a week, was shadowing the entire confrontation. At 10:14, it surfaced, 6 nautical miles from the Shandong. The Chinese lookouts froze as the black hull rose from the water like a steel leviathan. Spray cascaded off the sail as the U.S. flag glinted in the sun. For 90 seconds, the submarine remained surfaced, long enough for every Chinese camera to record the moment. Then, just as quickly, it slid back beneath the waves. The message was unmistakable. We were here all along. 10:21 hours. Combat airspace, South China Sea. The last J-15S were running low on fuel, one pilot transmitted, meaning he had barely enough to return to base. They peeled away one by one, leaving the sky empty except for American fighters. From the Nimitz, radar screens cleared as the Chinese forces began retreating. The captain gave a small nod. "Maintain course," he ordered. "Freedom of navigation continues. No missile launches, no dogfights, just an unmistakable display of supremacy." 10:32 hours. Chinese carrier group withdrawal. Beijing's warships turned north. Official statements would later describe it as a scheduled exercise completion, but internal reports, obtained and verified by Global Warfare Report, revealed the truth. Their intimidation attempt had failed spectacularly. The Shandong's aircraft returned with empty tanks. Her submarine's position had been compromised. Her destroyer had been mapped and logged. The South China Sea remained, once again, wide open. 10:47 hours. USS Princeton Bridge. The captain looked out over the calm horizon. "Mark the log," he said. "Freedom of navigation maintained. No hostile acts recorded." The officer of the deck nodded, writing the final entry of the day's operation. In the distance, the Nimitz carrier group sailed on, unbothered, unchallenged, and undefeated. China had sent warships, fighters, and submarines to intimidate the U.S. Navy. Instead, they exposed every weakness, technological, tactical, and psychological. And for the Americans, it was just another ordinary day in the world's most contested waters. This is Global Warfare Report.